I'm excited that we're starting up the community office hours again. I know we haven't done it in like a few years as Dagster, but since we're like an open source project, I feel like it makes sense to have us connect with the community and be able to answer questions live, that type of deal.
Yeah, I'm excited too. It's going to be a casual, pretty informal webinar. People are welcome to chat. We can bring people on camera if they want to. We have the GitHub discussion where people have already asked a few questions, so we'll be going through those. And we're also going to be doing some community highlights and showcase some of the contributions that people have made. But definitely excited for it.
You guys got any fun plans this weekend?
They opened an arcade next to my apartment, so we're going to go play some arcade games, which would be fun. What about you, Dennis?
I've got a ride up north, so going to go up to Door County, and then I've got a 100-mile ride on Sunday.
And for people not aware, that's a bicycle ride.
yeah, can't
not
run
a
that
Harley motorcycle.
Yeah.
Yeah, and me, my son has been really into the farm lately. He's like 18 months old. So I'm going to take him there and check out the goats and sheep because he really seems to like those.
Nice. Should we give it a little bit more? Or should we just go ahead and get started?
Let's give it a little bit more. I am currently trying to fix our YouTube stream.
Oh, gotcha. Yeah, and just so people know, we plan on doing these office hours monthly. They're going to be informal. So if you ever have a question, we'll probably have them like on the first Friday of each month, just an outlet for you to get your questions answered and a way for us to kind of talk about the community.
Yeah.
How's the YouTube stream looking?
Still working on it, but I think we can kick it off.
All right, sounds good. Yeah, so to start for this office hours, I wanted to talk about some contribution highlights. We had a few first-time contributors. Whether it's a small contribution or a big one, I think it's super exciting to get your first contribution into an open source project. So I really wanted to highlight that. I remember before I started working in open source software, I was so nervous to open a pull request. And then when people were like friendly, it just like really opened my mind to how cool open source was. So I wanted to call out a few people here who made their initial contributions. These are contributions included things like adding a few kinds tags. So when you define an asset, you can specify a kinds tag, and you want to be able to specify like different icons for the tools you use. Or there was a UI change that made it so for a partitioned asset, you can more easily click those partitions. There was some help just on the DG command line. If you're looking for like a good first time contribution, I think the command line is often a good one to look at, just because the complexity is a little bit reduced from like the web application or the servers or things like that. But just a huge thank you to our first time contributors that are shown here. I also wanted to talk about just some really momentous like contributions that were made. So these aren't necessarily a first time contributor, but some really cool contributions from the community. Joseph here made an update to the Databricks integration to make it so that you could specify cluster configuration parameters for Azure attributes or Google Cloud attributes. This is super beneficial for people who are in these different cloud platforms. So definitely really nice for him to contribute that upstream to us. Also, Justin, who created a new integration entirely. So in the community integrations repo, that's where we house some of the non-Dagster maintained integrations. And he created one for something called Dataform. This is Google Dataform, and this is a way to build pipelines on top of BigQuery using SQL. So now we have a Dagster Dataform integration, which is super exciting. So thanks, Justin, on that. And then Steven is currently working on some improvements to our Airbyte integration. He's been working really hard on this. We haven't merged it just yet, but I think we're really close to a place where it can land. But this really makes it, it modernizes the Airbyte integration to work both with like open source Airbyte, their cloud offering, and being able to more easily configure that Airbyte configuration. So thanks to Steven there. And that was it for the highlights. Now we're going to move into the office hours. If you have any questions, you can put them in the Q&A and we'll prioritize those. I see Benjamin already has a question, so we'll start with that. We also have some of the top questions asked but to Ask AI. So if you're not familiar in Slack, we have an Ask AI channel, and we have some top questions that we're going to go through here. Actually, while I'm going through these, maybe Dennis, you can start looking at Benjamin's question, and then we can move over to that one. But I think it's important to kind of reiterate some of these top questions that people are asking Ask AI. So a really common one is just, how do I get started with Dagster? And like, this is a totally valid question. I think the learning curve is relatively steep, but at the end of the day, what I would really just recommend for getting started with Dagster is going through the Dagster Essentials course. And that'll really teach you the fundamentals of what an asset is, how to define a pipeline, how to use partitions, things like that. And really just how you would even start creating a project. So how you would scaffold your project. And that's really just what you need to do to get started. So you can scaffold a project, run DG dev in that directory in your terminal, and you'll have a Dagster instance running. And then it's really just about defining the assets, figuring out what you're trying to do with your data pipelines, how to ingest data, how to model that, and fit it into the framework of Dagster. And I think the Dagster Essentials course follows that really well. Another common question, and this might be a review for a few of the folks that are already in here, is just, what is a software-defined asset? And Alex, if you're not still tinkering with the YouTube live stream, do you want to talk a little bit about that? Or if you're still working on it, you can totally do that too.
Yeah, I can talk about software-defined assets. So software-defined assets is like it's like kind of the main building block in Dagster. And when you go to the UI and you see all the little boxes, those are software-defined assets. And in code, it's essentially a Python function where you are running an op, which is like the Dagster abstraction part of asset that is like the compute used to generate the asset. So think in terms of nouns, whether it's like a database table, a view, a machine learning model, what have you. And then what makes it asset special is you can attach all this metadata to them. So that means like their name, their description, their dependencies, any sort of automations or tagging logic to help you organize the asset. And then, of course, the name is the last part of the software-defined asset.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Thanks, Alex. Yeah, I think what clicked for me when I was first learning about assets was it being a noun. Like coming from Airflow, where everything is task-oriented and it's a verb and it's like processing job, blah, blah, blah. And it's like doing some kind of computation. It's a paradigm shift to think of an asset as a noun, or like the thing being produced. So you'd have like a CSV file, a Postgres table, a BI report, these different objects that are the result of your computation. And the software-defined asset is a way to model that as a function in Python. Another common question, oops, I'll go back, that we get is, how do I integrate Dagster with DBT? And we've seen people who kind of just like home roll their own solution, but really like the Dagster DBT integration is really great. And it allows you to just point like a DBT asset to a DBT project. So like with Python code or the Dagster component, you can point to your DBT project and it'll automatically build your manifest file and produce assets for every single model in your DBT project. For those who aren't as familiar with semantic layers or like these transformation frameworks, DBT is a way to create SQL models that have this lineage to them, similar to like a Dagster asset lineage. And so they pair really well together. And if you found yourself writing a ton of SQL queries and like trying to reuse CTEs or kind of like just link them all together. DBT is a really great framework for that, as is like SQL Mesh or these other semantic layer frameworks. But yeah, the DBT integration is pretty great. Another question we got was, what is an asset spec? And this one people might not be as familiar with when they first start using Dagster. And it's just like that metadata behind your asset. So you can, as a parameter to an asset, pass in this spec, and it's just like the metadata, like the group name, like metadata fields, tags, kinds, things like that. Maybe we'll go a little bit faster through these next ones, but what should be the file structure of a Dagster project that includes a separate DBT project or other projects? And the Dagster framework's actually pretty flexible, and you can do this all sorts of different ways. I personally prefer to have my DBT project, like if I had a repo, it'd be like the Dagster project, the DBT project, like all of them side by side. But you could totally throw it as like a nested folder. It really depends on like your Git flow and how you're collaborating with other people. Like maybe a different team is managing the DBT project, so maybe your folder structure should kind of map to that like team structure. And then we kind of like, we also had some basic questions on like, what are jobs and like, how long can sensors executions go for and things like that. And I think for these, the Ask AI actually had a pretty good response. So I encourage people when they have these like questions to use Ask AI and to just peruse the docs. And what we're trying to do is, as more people ask questions in Ask AI, take those learnings and bring them back into the docs so people can find the information they need better.
And just for like a PSA, you can access the Ask AI either on the web on our docs. There's a little button at the bottom, or in our community Slack server.
Yep. Dennis, how's it going with Benjamin's question? Got any insights there?
Yeah, it's definitely an interesting one to start things off with. So Benjamin's question in the chat, if I'm understanding it correctly, is that he has a schedule that runs every 5 minutes, and the underlying data for it is partitioned, but the partitions are a different increment. The partitions are hourly. So there's kind of this mismatch when he's trying to use the built-in Dagster function build schedule from partition jobs. So that's defaulting to the run the schedule on the partition, which would be hourly, rather than running that every 5 minutes. So I guess the two things for that would be, yeah, it's interesting to see that kind of interaction between two different Dagster abstractions. And I'm guessing just the function just defaults to believing that the partition should be the main source of the schedule. So I think you'd have to probably build a more custom schedule, just like using DG schedule, and then taking advantage of the context of the schedule and the partition context within that. It still would need a little bit of custom work. I guess the one question I'd have is just why have the difference between partition and the schedule of, should the data be partitioned at the hour and then scheduled hourly, or should the data be partitioned in 5-minute increments and then still have the schedule match up there?
Thanks, Dennis. Yeah. And if you believe like this Dagster invariant violation error or something is a valid bug, like I definitely encourage you to open like a GitHub issue, and we'll try to get that addressed. Yeah. Any additional context you need, Dennis? Or Benjamin, you're welcome to, let's see, did you send something in the chat? Oh yeah, he said exactly. Okay. If there's any other context, Benjamin, or more follow up for Dennis, feel free to let us know in the chat. Anything else you want to say on that front, Dennis?
Yeah, I think we'll see in the questions coming up, but everyone's definitely free to ask questions in this session in real time. If you do want to put these questions in the GitHub issue leading into it, we have a little bit more time to kind of play around with things beforehand. So some of the questions that we're going to talk about next are ones that I had just like a little extra time to play around with and before.
Yep. I actually see Nestor's question here that I can address pretty quickly. So I'll do that one really quick. But it said, why is it, oh, you have the Benjamin's showing. Hi, why is it necessary to have a setup.py file even when a PyProject.toml already specifies the dependencies? This is actually something that we fixed this week. So we were in the process of migrating our projects from this traditional setup.py to the newer PyProject structure. And this is also as we start to use UV a little bit more as our like recommendation for working with projects. And there was an incompatibility with Dexter Plus and some of the features we were making with open source. So to answer your question, it should not be necessary. And after the release, we'll probably make the release next week, then you won't need it anymore. So you're totally right. It was an oversight when we were making that change. So it should be much better moving forward, and you'll just need that PyProject.toml. All right.
Awesome.
I'll let you guys look at Abanov's question here while we move on, or maybe Alex, you can look at that while we move on to some of the questions that were asked in the GitHub discussion. And the first one, Dennis, maybe you and I can talk about this, but it was from Sebastian saying, I'm trying to get a deeper understanding of how Dagster approaches idempotency in practice. I know partitions are a big part of the story. They provide referential timestamps and allow reruns of backfills in a deterministic way. Moreover, are there mechanisms for handling temporary storage inside an asset? Really, like the question is just like, how do you define these pure functions that have idempotency? And for those who maybe aren't as familiar with this concept, it's essentially when you have a function that every time you run it, regardless of the state of the database or everything else, you'll get the same result every time. So for example, imagine you were ingesting data from a weather API, and in your code, you naively just were going to get like the latest data every time you run your computation and you put that into a data warehouse. Every time you run that, it'll be different because it'll just get the latest data. If you wanted to make this a pure function that results in the same output every time, you would want to have these parameters of like the specific range of an hour of data that you're getting. That way, so every time you call it, those parameters will result in the same output. So it'd be like the data for that hour. And when you're modeling your assets, you'll want to do similar things in just like making them not dependent on external state. And with partitions, it's really intuitive where say you have like an asset that's replicating data from Postgres to Snowflake, and you're like just replicating one day of data. If you have a partition, daily partition, then like you would partition by day, and then it would only replicate that day of data. So each partition would be pure. When you want to start to do similar things without partitions, you have to consider how to use your like run configurations. So the alternative to this in Dagster is configs, and you can also reduce like computational waste this way. So say you have like a run configuration that lists in parameters, you would only operate on like the data that those parameters like influence, and you can even like cache that computation that relies on those parameters so that if it already happened, you could store it. You would have like a file or something where that computation took place. So, or you could skip the computation. So that's kind of like a long-winded way of talking about like, yeah, partitions are a great way to do it. Configurations also are. And then just like at the end of the day, Dagster is just Python code, and there's a lot of great ways to like structure your code to be pure in Python already, and there are a lot of great resources out there. Dennis, did you want to talk at all about idempotency and pure functions in addition to what I said?
No, I think that was a really good explanation. I really keyed in on the second half of this question just because it involved resources, which are one of my favorite things in Dagster. So that was the code I prepped for this.
Okay, and then actually, should we share that code?
Sure.
Yeah, maybe you can walk us through that code. Actually, I think I have it open. Cool. So is this the one you want me to share, Dennis?
Yeah, so this was just playing around with this again, the second part of the question of how you can interact with APIs that have expensive calls or something like that, and how you cache that in Dagster. So, like I said, resources are one of my go-to in Dagster. If I'm ever working with an external service, I pretty much always write a resource for it. Um, and you just get a lot of flexibility, and it leads to much cleaner code. And so there's a lot of different ways you can do caching within a resource. And this shows kind of the first way, which is more so caching within the asset itself. So this resource has just a single method to it of this. It just does addition, but it has this sleep in it. So, but we're also just using func tools to cache the results of the addition. So it's caching this within the resource itself. But with Dagster and assets, every asset initializes its own resource. And we do this just so because of the different ways you can execute Dagster, we don't always know that every asset will be run within the same within kind of the same container, depending on how you're executing everything. So in this case, each of these assets will initialize its own expensive resource cache, and that first call will be expensive, so it will take the 5 seconds, but doing subsequent calls that use the same input parameters will be instant because it's cached within the resource. So that's kind of the simple way to do kind of at this level, but really what I wanted to do was get caching across assets. So that's the next code snippet.
Yep, I'll scroll down. And I just wanted to call out, like, this is really where the magic happens, this LRU cache, where it'll know if you've already called this function with a specific set of parameters, it'll just get it from the cache instead of doing the computation again. So yeah, this is super cool.
Yeah, so this one's a little bit more complicated. But so this is still doing caching within the resource, but it's pickling the results of the addition and saving it to a file. So in this case, both the assets make one call, and the second asset is dependent on the first asset and just makes the same call. But in this case, the first asset will take 5 seconds to run, but the second one will be instant because they're sharing that underlying cache between them. And that's at the system level of they're both that's just pickling a file and saving it on local storage. So this point, you still get caching, but it assumes that the assets are running in the same system. So there could still be instances where you have assets running in separately in different systems where they would not have the benefit of the same caching. And at this point, you'd have to start to look at some storage layer in a place that both can access. So if you wanted to save the results of your cache in like Dynamo or something. But so it's just kind of interesting showing, again, the flexibility of Dagster, and then also just kind of needing to know your use case for how you want to handle your caching. But this was just kind of interesting going down of everything available because it was a little different than I thought when I first started out doing this.
Nice. Yeah, this is super cool. You mentioned Dynamo. Another option is just throwing things into S3 or some kind of object storage as like kind of a way of checkpoint files as you're doing your computations. Yeah, this is a really cool solution. Cool. Let's see. Any questions we want to address before we move to the next one that was on the GitHub discussion? I think we can move on. Yeah, so Ryan said, what problems should I be running up against before deciding to roll my own I/O manager? And how should I design my own I/O manager? I see Orion's actually in the chat. And just as a refresher, I/O managers are a way to magically read from different services from your assets direct, like from the inputs and outputs of your assets. So instead, like say you return a data frame from an asset, you could have that automatically write to BigQuery or Postgres or some kind of storage through an I/O manager. And I wanted to point out in this doc, or is this the doc? No, that's not the right doc. Let's see here. Oh, I don't have it open. But essentially in our documentation, we actually advise against using I/O managers for most cases. Just using resources and calling those resources in the body of your function often results in more intuitive code, because I/O managers are kind of this like magical thing that works behind the scenes. Sometimes it's better to be more explicit through the use of a resource. But when you do start to consider using I/O managers, I think like it really boils down to how your teams operate and how you want to enable the other data engineers. So like if you're creating like a shared I/O manager that everybody wants to use, you'll really need to consider like what sources they want. And Dennis, I know you did a little bit of research on I/O managers. This one's in the context of caching, I believe, right? This code example.
Yeah, just since my mind was already in caching for resources, I was just looking at implementing a very simple I/O manager that does really a similar thing. And you can see the code is a lot less dense here than the resource above. I will say that, as Colton would say, I/O managers contain a lot of magic under the hood. So I enjoy Dagster's I/O managers that it creates, but I am much more hesitant about building custom I/O managers than I am custom resources, because custom resources, I think, as people have been mentioned in the chat, look pretty much like standard Python. Like it's pretty easy to understand a resource without knowing the ins and outs of Dagster. Versus I/O managers have a lot more potential for confusion and having to know a little bit more about the execution of Dagster, and just it's much harder to know when you're going to hit the real limits around just like the memory of what you're pushing into your IO manager and extracting from downstream assets. That's why for the most part, it's usually better to just use assets that represent just like a pointer to a table, and it's just like a string and a name rather than the contents of the entire table, since it's much less clear at what point you'll run into issues.
Yeah. I did want to address Abhinav's question about this, like going back to like the resources you defined. They do look very similar to other Python classes. I think one of the main ways they are different is just how they're handled in the Dagster framework. So both how they're exposed in the UI, and then also how you can do this dependency injection. So you can see how as a parameter to this function, we're able to say expensive resource cache is this kind of resource. And then when you create your definitions, you can register this resource to show up within your assets as a parameter magically, which you wouldn't be able to do with just a vanilla Python class. So it really boils down to like the the composability within the Dagster framework and versus just using a plain class. Orion said the magic has been nearly all of their friction. Okay, and Abhinav's giving some more context around executors. While we look into that, I'm gonna go back to the slide deck. And Sylvia asked a question in the GitHub discussion about Iceberg. So we have an integration with Apache Iceberg that's currently in beta. And the question was, or in preview, and the question was like, what are the potential breaking changes? Should they be concerning? What is the timeline for a more stable stage? And typically what we do is we'll release an integration in this like beta format for a set period of time, typically around like the 3-month mark. And then once we have like confirmation that it's working well for the community, we'll move it into a more stable name, just like it's publicly available without those beta warnings. So I would say like there shouldn't be a huge amount of concern that it'll change drastically, especially if it hasn't been changing in the past few weeks under active development. But if you do see an integration that's like in the staging label, that like just to see, double check how long it's been in that state, and then you can expect it to be production ready soon. And then also if you like if it is like a blocker for your ability to use Dagster, if you just open up a GitHub discussion or comments somewhere iterating that, we can definitely prioritize like reviewing that, talking with customers to see how they're using it and getting that into a production ready state. So if it's very important for you guys, just let us know. All right, I think those were all of the questions that were on the GitHub discussion. I know that Abhinav had this question on executors. Alex or Dennis, do you have any insights for this question in particular?
Yeah, I had to do some research for this one, but Abhinav was asking are there plans to allow heterogeneous mixed executors in our asset graph? And it's one of the main things holding us back from more widespread asset adoption. If not, why, and what are the barriers to entry there? So I took a look at our docs for this, since this isn't an area I'm like super knowledgeable in. But one thing you could do is have separate jobs and asset groups for different executors, or you could create a custom one, or you could use Dagster pipes, which is our like kind of blessed path for whenever you need to interact with external compute, because it allows you to pass context both in and out and leverage those external services where it makes sense instead of being bound by like the Dagster system.
Yeah, I would definitely encourage you to check out pipes. And we have pipes implementations for Kubernetes and Dockers. Oh, they use pipes already. Okay, cool. Yeah, I think pipes are kind of the way to go in this case. Like the primary drawback is that you do have a small computation happening on the Dagster side of the orchestrator that's like polling the where the execution is happening. But yeah, it's easier to set up. It's true. Yeah. I think pipes is what I would recommend, and then maybe building some utilities around that where, for example, you could have like a factory pattern to produce assets that are already wrapping that pipe. And I've seen one person who like they created their own decorator as like a custom asset that will like already instantiate a pipes client for you, and you can like more easily just like give it a Kubernetes like command or something, and it'll just create the Dagster asset utilizing a pipe for you. And it's just like you can make your code reusable in that way. But yeah, I to what Alex was saying, I guess there's a way to do it with the groups.
Yeah, in classic
limitation
Dagster fashion.
And concurrency. Interesting.
Yeah, in classic Dagster fashion, there's like a few ways to do each thing.
Yeah, Abhinav, if you have more detail on the concurrency issue, I would be curious if you could open a GitHub issue, and we can dig into that further. I guess, yeah, if you could also technically like fan out Oh, I see what you're saying. You could have like a graph backed asset and a fan out inside of there that uses the pipes in each one, but those are within an op. Yeah, definitely link us to the GitHub issue, and we'll try to get more information for you on that front. Cool. It looks like, did we answer everything in the Q&A section?
We got a few more questions. Let me add them to the screen here. So this one's from Orion, and each resource is built instantiated per asset. Is it possible to have this behavior be per job, or are all assets in a single job not required to execute on the same Python process? So I know when you instantiate resources, it isn't like specific to that asset. It usually is specific to however many asset or resources you instantiate in like a deployment. Generally, if I am like doing a resource for like one database, I'll just have that be the resource in that particular deployment. And then I will bring it in as needed in a particular asset. And then whenever I do like any asset chain jobs, the assets will access those resources as needed.
Yeah, and I think this question does go back to Dennis's demo of like when you were caching within your resource, it invoked those functions independently. Dennis, do you have any more context around like the life cycle of these resources in Orion's use case?
Yeah, I believe that a resource is just only exists for that asset. So I think, yeah, if you to get that level of customization of getting it shared across just a specific job, I think you'd have to get more into like a custom executor kind of thing, which be a little trickier.
Yeah. What other questions you got, Alex?
We have another one from Abhinav about we have a lot of daily partition asset data that makes up a catalog of data for all our team. Given the nature of our data, it becomes very stale in about 3 months. What are some industry standards for date, TTL, and production? And we've noticed a lot of slowdowns in our UI.
That's a good question. We don't have a built-in feature that I'm aware of in Dagster for like pruning like backfills. I have seen people come up with custom solutions using the GraphQL API of Dagster to go and get rid of previous runs. Dennis, have you seen anything on this front of just like you're only interested in a window of data, like the 3 most recent months, as Abhinav said? Ideally, like the Dagster UI wouldn't slow down or query like all this history, and you wouldn't see these like slowdowns. But I feel like there's no built-in feature, so you'd have to do this kind of manual pruning of the run history.
Yeah, I don't know on the Dagster end, and we've definitely had jobs in the past that move stale data into cheaper storage layers of just moving things like out of S3 into Glacier, but usually that's just a life policy on like the bucket and exists separate from Dagster. So I think what Colton's saying of needing to kind of clean things up on the Dagster end would be yeah, a little separate process.
I'm also curious if you were to create a daily partition definition and the start date was dynamic, so that like it was like always 3 months ago. Each time you loaded your definitions, your partitions would only go back 3 months. But I don't know how that would render in the Dagster UI, and that might be problematic.
Abhinav said they have like a hacky maintenance asset that prunes all the asset jobs in the compute logs and run reductions.
Yeah, Abhinav is one step ahead of us.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely talk to us more, Abhinav, on either Slack or GitHub discussions around the problems you're facing, because these are really good points you're bringing up, and we can try to prioritize them within the engineering team.
That's it on the questions we have. These are all really interesting questions, guys. Thanks for your participation.
Yeah, thanks. Going back to our slide deck, we wanted to just shout out or call out a couple of upcoming events. But before I do that, I also want to say, if you have anything cool that you want to share as a part of a community showcase for next month's session, I'm very interested in getting somebody not Dagster affiliated up here and presenting or talking about some of the work that they've done. So if there's anything cool that you've been working on that you want to share too, definitely let me know, and we can try to accommodate you and get your work showcased. But in terms of upcoming events, we have a couple of exciting ones. We have a deep dive coming up with Zach Romer, who you may have seen on Slack. He is our most prolific community member on the Slack in answering questions. He has, it's like a purple zebra image for his avatar. But he will be giving a deep dive about how they use Dagster at Empirico for biotech work, which we're really excited to hear about. He's a very long time Dagster user, and this is his first time doing a webinar with us, which is exciting. We will also be at Disney on September 8th. There is a Disney Data and Analytics Conference September 8th. Alex Noonan's going to be there. Are you excited, Alex?
Yeah, I've never been to Disney before. So yeah, it's an interesting experience, like for my first Disney trip, going for a data analytics conference.
Yeah, not the typical Disney experience. So we'll be there. So if you're in Florida, definitely let us know. And then we will be at Big Data London, which is September 24th and 25th. So any of our London-based Dagster folks, definitely let us know and we can meet up. I think that there will be some happy hours that we're attending, and we would love to chat with you. But that is it. We have some upcoming events that are exciting, but we're super thankful that you guys joined us, and hopefully you found some of the answers to these questions enlightening. If you want to follow up, continue to use the GitHub discussion. I'll be monitoring that. And then if you've noticed any bugs or anything, definitely open an issue and you can tag any one of us and we'll try to get it prioritized. But that's all we have for this session. Anything else from you guys?
No, I'm good, and I'm happy that we're going into the weekend after such a great session with all the good engagement.
Yeah, me too. All right.
Yeah, this was great. These are all really good questions.
All right. Thanks, everyone.